In medieval times, there was something called foetor judaicus. It was a medieval Christian slander against the Jews. Foetor judaicus, Latin, what it means is the Jewish stench. That is, that Jews had a particularly evil, foul smell about them called the Jewish stench. Now, obviously, it would be very easy to determine if this was true or not. You could just smell, and if there was no stench, then that would appear to refute the libel. So how could it persist? Well, you see here, there was another component to that libel. You see, Jews who didn't have the foetor judaicus, they did not have the Jewish stench, was because they used Christian blood to rid themselves of the Jewish stench. So we can use one libel to defend the other libel. So yes, Jews have this stench about them. You do not witness this stench. In other words, you smell them, they seem to be like anyone else, which in medieval times is probably pretty bad. But nevertheless, they seem to be like everyone else. So therefore, you have another libel, which is the use of Christian blood, the blood libel, which Jews use to cure the Jewish stench. One of the features of these libels, whether it was the torturing of the host or the blood libel, the poisoning of the wells, the Jewish stench, etc., was that there was nothing the Jew could do to justify themselves. There was nothing that a Jew could do to refute this. There was a famous case, the Bayless blood libel trial, beginning of the 20th century in Russia, in which all the evidence showed that Bayless was innocent, and indeed the court actually, after a trial, lengthy trial, declared him to be innocent. But even though they declared him to be innocent, they still declared that it was part of Jewish tradition to actually kill Christian children and use their blood. So you can't escape, even though Bayless himself was innocent, but the Jewish community as a whole was guilty. So there's nothing you can do which will refute them because they'll just use one libel to support the other libel. There's nothing a Jew could do to show their righteousness. Unfortunately, this still exists. The BDS movement, for example, and a lot of the anti-Israel activists, literally there is nothing that Israel can do which is correct, which is right, and nothing Israel can say to justify themselves. And the whole idea of it is to bring Israel to economic ruin and destruction. Obviously, it's not about conflict resolution. It's obviously not about protection of anyone else. It is about destruction of the state of Israel, because the way a lot of these people see it is that Israel can do nothing right, and there is no justification for anything in Israel's side of the equation. There's almost nothing that an Arab terrorist can do which so horrible that they will condemn it outright without any however, without any caveat. There's always going to be a caveat. However, etc. And there's nothing that Israel can do, no matter how minor, even though it's in self-defense, etc., which will not be outright condemned, whether it be by the United Nations, whether it be by the BDS movement, whether it be by anti-Israel movements as a whole. And I think it's very similar to the medieval libels, that literally there's nothing that a Jew can do that is right, and there's nothing that a Jew can say that will justify or defend them. And in the same way, they have already decided that Israel is in the wrong 100%. That means in many conflicts, there are two sides. So one side may have claims, another side may have claims. We try to resolve the claims. But if you've already resolved in your mind, and if you've already made it a point of saying that one side of the conflict is utterly, completely, 100% wrong, they have nothing that can justify their existence and their righteousness, etc., then you are basically tying into the foetor judaicus libel, the Jewish stench. What you're saying is, yes, the Jews have a stench, the state of Israel has this stench, and if the state of Israel says, no, we don't, and you can prove it, and you can show that it's not so, they'll just say, ah, yes, but they use Christian blood to cure the Jewish stench. So they're not saying that exactly in those words, but the mindset is exactly the same. The mindset is the Jews, and read into Jews, the state of Israel, can do nothing right. The Jews cannot justify themselves in any way, and they have no excuses. Their opponents, their enemies, can justify themselves. They have very good points. They have justified cause. They have righteousness. And so that, unfortunately, those are people who cannot be people who are fair. They cannot look at things in an objective manner. They have a completely distorted view, which I think, unfortunately, is medieval. Medieval in the worst sense of the word. Medieval in the sense of ignorance, in the sense of prejudice, and in the sense of a hatred and an anti-Semitism and a hatred for the Jews, Jewish people, and the Jewish state, which unfortunately is very difficult to combat. But hopefully, if we recognize it for what it is, that may take us a little step further in combating it. If people understand that what we are seeing here is not a legitimate attempt to resolve a conflict, but an illegitimate attempt to destroy one party in a conflict, then I think we'll make a step further in, hopefully, our support for justice, our support for the state of Israel, and our support for the Jewish people as a whole.